Hello, John.
Hello, Oliver.
So today we're going to talk about pandemics and we're going to talk about the present coronavirus and how it affects elderly people. So
Yes.
how do you think it affects elderly people, like going to church or doing regular things?
Well, elderly folk in their second childhood, we just put it that way, I suppose, soften the blow. Elderly people now are advised to stay indoors and only have to go out when it's absolutely necessary for to get, I suppose, supplies so as they can not be actually on a fast all the time, if you know what I mean. In other words, have food in the house. And so they have to go out for that. Now, I did notice in one particular supermarket there when I came back from my sojourn in holiday, shall we say, in Wexford, or in Rosslare there. And I noticed when I went to a supermarket in Kells, there was a queue. Now, it wasn't a long queue, but it was a queue, and the weather was a bit on the chilly side, so queuing is not something that I like to do when there's a chill wind knocking about, just to go on and spend money. It wasn't kind of a queue for a soup kitchen or something. It was a supermarket where you'd be forking out. So I declined that offer and went elsewhere and didn't have to queue at all, got what I required. But in any event, I can rightly say that the elderly now are obliged to sort of stay indoors because they're vulnerable. And that's not the best of things. Now, I'm certainly not staying indoors. I go out and about. Now, most places are closed, so when you go out and about, it's like going into ghost villages. Very strange. These are the people that wanted to open pubs and all the rest of it on Good Friday. And shop till you drop and drink till you drop. Now, that's bad. You have to have respect for tradition. The Fine Gael government and all the rest of it had no respect for this type of thing. And this is payback time in John Malone's opinion. So the elderly, anyways, I've just straightened the point. It seems to me that the elderly want to be catered for in a slightly different way than maybe what they are at the moment.
Okay. I think we done a video there a week or two ago where we were talking about a delivery service for elderly people, and we were talking about how the coronavirus can reset the relationship with the elderly because they have been forgotten about over the years, and there's a kind of distance between young people and the elderly. So there's opportunities there for people to re-engage with elderly people and to help them out.
There is, and it said, funny enough, in the EWTN that I look at, that people now are becoming more neighbourly towards each other, and they're going for walks. One individual that is a good commentator said that he hadn't cycled with his family for 5 years, and now he's doing that. And parks where there was only perhaps elderly, now there's families going about because schools are closed, and so families are now becoming together, and so they're more concerned now about their neighbour than they might have been heretofore because they were so busy in the rat race, and now that the rat race is over. They're at home, and some of them have their income has been they have no income because they were working for private concerns that are closed and they don't pay. It's only if you're a civil servant or a public servant that you get paid when you're not working. Private, you don't. In the States, they're helping people and bringing in those that have funds, and I think they're doing something like that here. And they have to because people are at home and have no income. Elderly have a pension, and people that are unemployed, but people that are working, that have been working, they don't have any of that. So they can be rightly stuck. So aside from the elderly, there's other people. But the elderly would be, because they're so vulnerable now with this coronavirus, they need all the help they can get. And as far as I can see, help has been coming their way.
Help is absolutely, but there's still a lot to do. For example, pharmacies, I think, will go a long way in delivering medication to the elderly directly to their doors. The elderly people shouldn't have to go to a pharmacy if they don't want to, or if they're not capable of going. Particularly in a pandemic, you don't want elderly, vulnerable people mixing with other people.
That's true. Yeah, you don't, because you have to sort of keep a distance, and I suppose keep your hands away from your face, and perhaps wear gloves. I noticed in some of the I came up on the motorway this morning, and I paid cash, but I noticed the cashier in the motorway in the where I had to pay go to the toll, yeah, had gloves, kind of gloves that would be able to handle money, so that's a very prudent thing to do, and because I had to root for this money, because funny enough, when you have, say, several pockets, it's always in the last pocket that you try when you ever get the money.
So are you saying you keep all your money in one pocket, John?
That's always the way. You put your hands, you say, it's supposed to be here, no it's not, and then you're rooting around. So anyways, I got it, but there was no queue behind me because there was very little traffic on the road. So they're all stuck at home.
Well,
and
we mentioned there in the video that we done a week or two ago, it was actually a man called Matt in Castleknock that suggested that there should be shopping hours for elderly, and we done a video on that, and that has been taken up now by the media, and Super Value and Lidl and Tesco's, they're all giving the elderly hours. So
that's good, and I think probably a delivery service that wouldn't be have excess charges or delivery charge, what have you, for the older folk, and that they would that it could be delivered to their door, perhaps in a bar, and then ring the bell or what have you, because now apparently you can't talk you have to keep a big distance, and so that means you'd be shouting at the party. And suppose they're a bit on the deaf side, because I know some people have a thing with jigs in their ear, they can't hear, so if you're speaking that side of them, you might be talking to the wall. You have to go that side. So to have this problem, and I haven't, thank God, but I think that should be a factor, as you rightly say. And also I think transport.
Yeah, we'll come back to transport in a second, John. I just want to go back to the shopping there for a second. Okay?
Right.
So if you look at Lidl and if you look at Tesco, these are multinational companies, right? You would think a company of those size would be ready for a pandemic and they could cater for their customers. The fact is they can't, right? Because what they should have in place is, my niece said that she ordered her shopping as usual in Tesco's,
yes,
and it was delivered. It was delivered 7 hours late because we're in a pandemic, and half the stuff was missing. Okay, so clearly there's a problem with the supply chain for Tesco's to get the food in the middle of a pandemic, but also there's no delivery service available for the elderly. They should get priority.
That's correct. And that would be, Tesco do have a delivery service. The two German ones, Aldi and Lidl, don't. As a matter of fact, they're have very little sort of by way of customer service, bar you're in the shop.
Well, they've actually changed it recently. They've actually introduced bicycle service now, like the old baskets from years ago. They have in certain locations. I think they've got some company, external company that looks after it. So it's a step in the right direction, probably.
Well, they won't be able to deliver much with that sort of a system. I mean, we had that when I was young, and local shops had what they called messenger boys. Even the post office had once called messengers that went on then to be postmen, and then maybe a bit further up the ladder. So what Lidl and Aldi are doing is kind of a bit stupid to my way of thinking, because you certainly can't deliver any distance with that kind of carry on.
Yeah, well, as we know, the reason they're probably using the bicycles is to make them look environmentally friendly.
Well, you see, that kind of chronology is for the birds, and it shows you how out of touch they are with reality. They'd want to wake up.
But it also tells us that if they're thinking of bicycles, that means they want to put clusters of stores everywhere, which of course is not a good thing for, as you were saying before, for that
Oh, not at
kills
all.
off the little shops.
Well, funny enough, this you mentioned customer or friend getting deliveries from Tesco, and half the stuff wasn't there because you see, this is where well, we'll be speaking about it hopefully later. But this is where a lot of the stuff in Tesco and these other supermarket groups are imported. Basic food items, basic fruit and veg. So aside from what you're saying there, there'd be a lot of stuff not available because it's imported, and this is where you need to be producing goods in this country. For example, cornflakes are imported. They used to be made here under license one time by a crew called Brown and Paulson, and Brown and Paulson had some kind of a product as well. Now I think they're gone, and in this country, Kellogg's had 75% of the grocery market when there was ordinary stores. And in Britain, I think they didn't have any more than about 40-45%, and yet they shifted the production under license of the Kellogg's cornflakes here back to England and imported the stuff. So, I mean, that could dry up.
Absolutely. Have you ever had medication delivered to you?
No.
Yeah, see, it's kind of, the pharmacies as well could do an awful lot. I mean, do you think?
Well, they could, especially now for ones, we say, living a few miles from the town. Yeah. I'm not a few miles from the town, I'm fairly near it. And damned a bit of it, well, I'm going to be stuck in a blinking house 24/7. No, John Malone doesn't believe in that nonsense while I'm still able to go about. And so I'm out and about. And I did some shopping there on Saturday. And mind you, there wasn't many in the local super value, and I got what I needed, and I had no difficulty. And and funny enough, I have a prescription for the chemist, and it just slipped me mind. But I'd have to now Monday. I'll be going on Monday to get that. Because as I say, I'm beside the town, and so I might have a walk into it, or I might just drive.
Very good. And the
but I know people just a few miles outside the town, they would want it, and not everybody has a car. Sometimes people haven't got a car; their relatives or somebody drives them in, and all the rest of it. They're not as connected as some.
Yeah. Now, if you look at your average taxi service, right? In a pandemic, a taxi service is like the bus service in the sense that it's a weak link in the chain, because you've got people going in and out of the taxi all day, and if they have a virus or whatever's wrong with them. So an elderly person who's vulnerable because of their health, or any person, okay, getting into a taxi, they probably would avoid it. So I think in that sense, maybe we could have a taxi service community based, that ordinary people would maybe bring the elderly to and fro where they needed to go.
Right, yes. Well, you see, this is the danger with this pandemic, or this virus, this coronavirus, and then the COVID-19. So there's all words, technical words, but it's the business of into taxis. Maybe somebody was in it that might have had carrying the bug. Would it be in the taxi? Now I use my own transport because I don't be carrying anybody whatsoever. So it wouldn't be contaminated in any way. So it's a tricky question. Because there seems to be no clear directives about these things. Mm-hmm. And buses now, but buses are still running. What way did they operate? I know, I mean, there's passengers get on them, but a passenger would be near another passenger, wouldn't it? I mean, they have to couldn't a bus be full?
This is the thing. I mean, again, maybe they should put on extra buses, because if you don't remember, the price of oil right now is actually very, very low.
Yeah, right, because suddenly there's no demand for it. Funny how the price has gone down.
It was quite appropriate. But like, the price of oil has gone down, it's collapsed, okay, because of Saudi Arabia or some other country. But so they could put on the extra buses, I suppose. But again, I think the bus, we're going to go on to design later on. We're going to be talking about the bus is a serious weak link in a pandemic, Okay, any bus, whether it's bus air
Anywhere
or it's
there's
a double bus.
crowds, because
Anywhere there's a crowd in a closed space.
yeah.
There's a big problem.
And don't
there.
forget, there's no windows in the buses now.
No, that's very, very true. Years ago there was.
There was, and you could be blew out of it. Because sometimes the window would be open and you go to try and close it, it would be stuck.
Yeah.
And the next thing is, I remember one time, myself and my late wife, Julie, was in a bus, and God, it was quite chilly, and I don't know what it was, but there was a window. And it was actually a foreigner that was driving the bus. It wasn't an Irish driver. And we moved up anyways and to try and get away from it. But then I spoke to the driver about it. Why it was the way it was. And he couldn't care less. So I reported it. And I think he would have been reprimanded for what he did. You see, you can't do things like that. So, anyways, but now there's no windows, and it could be sometimes they have air conditioning on with the heat and that. So, where's that? Couldn't that carry something?
Yeah,
you know,
and I mean,
or the cold air.
I travel on bus air a lot, and I have done so for about 30 years, right?
Yeah.
And what I've noticed now is that when you go on journeys, 200-mile journeys, the only people on bus air are elderly. They all have their free pass and they get to go out for their day. Okay, it's great, okay? But the problem is they could be walking themselves into a little trap there with the coronavirus because, it's in a closed space. There's no windows.
Aye, that's right. And then if it's cold enough as it is now at the moment, you leave the heating on. So that's coming in through vents. And people often see them putting their hands up, either turning something on or turning it off or what have you. So
they don't work half the time.
yeah, so all people's hands are going up, and oftentimes people go up to ring the bell.
Yeah.
There's a place for that in the buses that I travel on bus air, and that's when I was travelling. And so that means people, but they could have something. They might have, apparently people can have this and it doesn't affect them.
I suppose, look,
it's very strange.
The thing for peace of mind, if someone's getting on the bus air or Dublin bus, maybe they should have freely available gloves or masks, just to try and contain things.
Yeah, maybe ones that could be disposable or something.
Yeah.
It's true enough. Mind you, it's obviously it's a cost factor, but and then you've just got the driver doing it. There was a time there was conductors on buses. Now, of course, it's not. It's just the driver is taking money and that. So he's probably at risk. But then you might have one of these kind of gloves that you can do these things. He probably has gloves now too, the driver.
Well, I'll tell you what they've done. I was talking to a bus driver and I said, what precautions are you taking? Because a bus is a dangerous place when there's a pandemic. And he said to me, well, you know where the driver sits? He says there's a glass window between us and the customer.
Yeah.
He said, well, there's holes in that for ventilation and also for us to hear what the customer is saying.
Yeah.
He says all the bus drivers now have put cling film
so they
over
can't
the
hear
holes.
them.
What?
They can't hear them.
No, cling film. The
All right,
plastic.
they can hear them then.
They can hear them, but the thing is that they're trying to protect themselves from people breathing the virus on them.
Right.
See? So people are up to their own, making up their own.
They are.
ways.
Well, you see, because of the nature of what experts are saying, and I noticed now as I was coming along the dual carriageway or the motorway, there were signs every so often stuck up about contacting the HSE, read latest updates and that kind of thing. So they must be spending a fortune on roads, because I saw it there when I was coming back from Rosslare there earlier on the week, and I saw it there coming down here this morning. That here they had this business of signs about ringing the HSE. So like for the latest this, that and the other. So they probably have a recorded announcement. But it means sort of thing that you're trapped. And I believe now, I was talking to a friend who was expecting his son and his daughter-in-law from Rome. They lived there, and now they're stuck to their head, they can't move. And if anybody is out in the street, they can be fined 200 euros. So they're taking it very serious in Italy because they were a bit lax, and it just caused a lot of deaths there now so far in Italy, more than anywhere else. I suppose because the number of people that come into that country, and don't forget it was used by asylum seekers in a big way. The Irish had a ship. The Irish Navy had a ship out there ferrying these migrants, or whatever they call them, asylum seekers, wherever they were, all coming from Africa and these other countries into poor Italy. And I think they had to put a stop to it.
Absolutely. So there we go. We'll be moving on to other areas that we can maybe suggest ideas for the pandemic.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much, Albert.